Hey guys, complete trash build connoisseur here. Today I want to talk about Jiquanis. This item has quite a bit of potential, and that is mostly because of this mod right here, this 1 to 53 spell lightning damage per int. This mod's variable, but point being, this value is so much higher than you see on other effects with this like same kind of stat line, right? If you look at Shaper weapons with this mod, it's 1 to 6 lightning damage per tenant. Look at Handwism action, it's 1 to 12. So this item quite literally is like 9 times as much as the Shaper mod, and then like 4.5 or something like that times Howa. And I will mention that in the current state of PoE, spells are at a pretty weak point. Attacks in generally are much stronger, and particularly melee is significantly stronger than spells in the current game. But point being, this is so much flat that I do think there is definitely something strong you can build around this, despite I would say that I've made 2 bad builds around this item so far, but more on that later. If you just think about how much int it would take to make this item give you an obscene amount of flat, like let's just say you get 1,000 int. It's not very difficult, but you definitely have to build around it to get 1,000 intelligence, right? But if you do that, you get about it's like, what is that, like 1 to 5,000 flat lightning damage. And just for context, to about double the damage of a spell, it generally takes about 500 flat. So that's quite a bit more than that, and you can stretch your int much further than that, and and just like really push that to the moon. And I would say, I don't think it's ever been easier to get damage as lucky in the current state of PoE. Like you can get Blue Dream if you've blocked recently, you have lucky lightning damage. You can use the amulet for lucky lightning damage. Point being, you can also just put a rune graft on that has this effect. Wreath and Light, I was hovering over the wrong one. This ground effect gives you a bunch of lightning damage, which is not going to really matter here, but it's going to give you lucky lightning damage, which if you have a range that's basically 0 to your max, this effect is usually about 33% more damage. So that 1 to 5,000 gets stretched quite a bit further. And if you use this effect or the blue nightmare effect for the same thing, you don't actually have to avoid going crit like you can with Acquire the Storm. So kudos to the chef. This item, and I genuinely mean this, is incredibly well designed. I just want to get the downsides of this item out of the way up front. So this gives you an amount of flat lightning that you would never otherwise be allowed to get, but because it gives you such an inherently anti-synergistic downside right off the cuff, like it gives you blood magic. Now, stacking intelligence, fantastic, but blood magic, really anti-synergistic because stacking intelligence gives you increased ES and flat mana. It deletes mana as an option entirely from the pool, and then while giving you tons of increased energy shield is still very strong, it means that you can't go CI, because if you go CI, you will just kill yourself because you only have 1 life and you can't cast your spells with 1 life. You can't get your cost to 0 as far as I know. Maybe in standard I'm sure you can, but in current like League you cannot. The only way to actually go CI and still do this is you use Whispers of Infinity, but that's also pretty anti-synergistic in the fact that you get 1 aura. That's a massive downside because you have no mana, you have no life to reserve your auras on, so you just get a single aura. Now, if you want to have auras in your life and play a Captain Lance style build, you can do that. Put auras on your life, you still get your blessings. This does not count against auras on your life, but you'll have to always keep your coruscating elixir up because unfortunately, in the current state of PoE, Shavron's Wrapping is not a real item despite it still existing in the current state of the game. That item really needs to be reworked or buffed or something. It's hilariously terrible. It's like 450 ES at max roll, and it's like, this is not even a good Twilight Regalia. So, what are we doing? But point being, you do get a ton of power for this item, but you do have to overcome the downside, and it's a pretty serious one. So there are plenty of ways to use this item. Like this guy's doing cool like Oshabia Unleash stuff, like Seal Mender stacking, a build that I really want to try at some point in this league. Sounds really badass. But yeah, he's technically put multiple arcs in the same links here because Unleash lets you do that. But I don't know if he wants 4 arcs on his build. But point being, you can do this. Like I think typical like a Inquisitor, like Coruscating Elixir shell is like how you build this. Like a split personality, fantastic, obviously, because you're going to be like hybrid strength and stack. For getting crit from Inquisitor, and then ES, it's going to literally scale your ES and life, the 2 things that you want to do with this item. So kind of honestly super synergistic. But I wanted to do weirder stuff. Like I wanted to try to mess around with Falborn Katava's Thirst. This guy has a very expensive version of this, and he deals obscene damage, has really crazy HP. Probably more money put into all of the builds I've ever made in my entire life combined. But there are plenty of people playing, well, I might say plenty, like 39 people, but and 2 of them are me. But there are people out here if you want inspiration. But I'm going to talk about the jank that I tried. So my first failed attempt at building around Jiquanis was with Falborn Katava's Thirst, and to get this to trigger, like 10 times a second, or even like 30 or 15 times a second with the next CDR breakpoint, you need to trigger a lot of spells a second. And generally, what I'll do if I want to get like this actually triggering like at least to 10 times a second, I would use something like bow quadcock because that's 30 spells a second. But are stuck on a staff, so we're using like our B tier cast on crit setups if we're trying to do something like that. Which Cyclone, we're not realistically getting more than 7.5 attacks a second because this is a 1.15 attack speed staff. That's really slow. So at best, we're getting like 7.5 spells a second, which is not remotely close to the around 20 you would get to actually trigger this properly, right? So that's very difficult. My idea was to do something like a Corpse Pack Necro, where if you use Arcanist Brand plus Desecrate and then an Offering, if you get both of those to cost 200 life, you get that brand to trigger 10 times a second, and then you take Runebinder. That's the requisite, 20 times a second, and that's like pretty reasonable to get the cast because Necro gives you 200% cast speed, so it's pretty easy to actually get there. Biggest problem with that is Desecrate does not have very good cost and reservation like multiplier supports that also support like an Offering. So to get the cost ramped up high enough, you have to use rings like this, which you can get tons of other useful status, but this is the most plus mana cost I could find, a bricked reflected ring, to get the cost to actually go over 200. So I got all that. That would all work. But then I had an idea that I think worked out even worse. So I never actually tried the brand setup. But I was thinking, well, Unearth has the highest cast time in the game, as 0.3 cast time, insanely fast. It is also projectile, so it has the worst mana cost multipliers available to us. Like you can use GMP, you can use Greater Volley, you can use Chain, both 50% reservation multipliers. So this plus life tap and then a 40% cost. I would do that over returning projectiles because returning projectiles has an unfortunate behavior when it hits mobs. So I was trying to use this or this plus cruelty. We get +1 level here and then a level 21 here. This was exactly over 200. It was like 201 life exactly. Perfect. We fixed it. Problem is, I was thinking, okay, so we get our Unearth 10 times cast a second, and then our single target, I just use Arcanist Brand plus like Soul Rend of the Spiral, or like any skill that costs a bunch, because Corpse Pack will make it trigger enough times. I don't even have to take Runebinder. That'll be like a perfect trigger rate. Everything's in harmony. Everything's great. My idea was that I would put Body Swap in the helmet and then 3 other damaging skills. But when you do this and then put Body Swap here, the Body Swap kind of flicks you just like in place, and then to mobs, and then back and forth. Felt absolutely horrendous. Build just kind of felt like unsalvageable. I was like, damn it. Because it sounded so like we would literally be zooming faster than the Frostblink Winter Blast guys because that is a 0.85 cast time, right? And this is it's like a third of that. It's crazy. But it just basically didn't work. And then I thought, well, I could just use Lightning Warp. You can't put Frostblink in like a trigger item like successfully anymore because its cast time gets added to its cooldown time. So I put Lightning Warp in the helmet. And then for whatever reason, I don't know why it does this, but Lightning Warp would just like sit you in the same spot. It would hardly move your character at all. So that also didn't really work. I don't know why it worked that way. Maybe it was just with Unearth it works that way, but yeah, it seemed like they would hardly move my character. It like wouldn't move my character forward really. It would like I would sit in the same place and then go backwards a bunch of times. So it's like just really, really not a pleasant experience. Now, I could have played the same build where I just like didn't move with something in my helmet, but the problem is I built my entire character around that concept, had no movement speed. I'm using a staff, so I can't shield charge, so character is just kind of bricked. I never actually got around to trying the brand setup, but I don't know if it would function properly, jumping through all those hoops. The Unearth one would probably function if you could fix the movement speed thing, but it had a lot of inherent problems because I was a hybrid character, and I was trying to scale off of Leech, which did work. I was taking an impossible escape down by, not Volpact, where is it? Oh yeah, by Versatile Combatant to take this right here to get increased maximum recovery per leech, and then taking the Life Leech, like instant Life Leech mastery. Like honestly, what's funny is at some points on this kind of setup, I was genuinely considering going like Bazlinker just because he has this 30% leech right here. Soul Tether has a 12% instant leech line. The problem is all the things that come with make it so your ES starts either at 0 or your ES gets turned off when it gets to full. So that does give you a ton of instant leech to solve like that part of the problem, but it has such a big downside. So yeah, there was a lot of inherent issues with the build. Yeah, it's pretty sad it didn't work out because it sounded so zoomy, but just the body swap behavior was just rancid. So the second build that I thought had Jiquani's potential, and I still actually do, by the way, I can't afford to keep exploring this concept. It's just outside, this kind of build is outside of my price range. I might revisit it because I do think the concept is very interesting, but essentially, this is built around something that I've had floating around my head for a while, and it's building a cast on crit looper. So normally with cast on like cast when damage taken looper, what you do is you have a skeleton that gets summoned, and then when that skeleton dies, you take damage from 1 to 2 heartbound loops. You take enough damage to proc all your cast when damage taken setups. And the way you do that is you get your skeleton's duration to be just longer than the cooldown of your cast when damage taken setups. And to do that, you use a bunch of like 2 dust jewels. You use less durations supported with it, and then you like take like less duration on the tree. You get that rate just right. It has a bunch of inherent downsides, like you have to path the duration nodes, you have to use a bunch of 2 dust jewels, you have to use Laurel's Flasks, so you have your ward up permanently so you don't kill yourself to your damage, all that stuff. The idea with a cast on crit looper is use a cast on crit setup that will summon the maximum number of skeletons, and then every time you trigger it, it will blow up the pre-existing skeletons. So for example here, my cast on damage taken cooldown is just under 6 seconds. My Cyclone cast on crit setup's attack time is just over 6 seconds. So what happens is every time I trigger my cast on crit, it will summon the max number of skeletons that will then blow up the max number of skeletons. And the reason it's max is because I have triggerbots here, so this will summon 6 skeletons every time. I'm currently using one that's a little lower, but not super important detail right now. So let's say every time I trigger cast on crit, it will summon 6 skeletons. And then every time that happens, it will blow up the existing 6 skeletons. Then I will take X amount of damage based on all those dying. So every time it triggers, it will make me deal enough self-damage to proc all my cast when damage taken setups. Meaning it is a extremely low committal version of a loop setup. I thought it's pretty interesting. I have it socketed in faster attacks and accuracy, so I have to scale that less. Pretty happy that I was able to get these gloves and then annul and save them. But yeah, essentially that's that is the concept of this build. And the reason for me wanting to do this is because this gives you so much flat lightning that I was again thinking of the concept of like when you get a ton of like flat like this, you just kind of want to get maximized throughput in a way that you like so you trigger as many spells with high effectiveness as you can per second. And to do that, I'm using things like Frostbolt to proc my vortex protection, and I'm using Ice Spear hovering over my utility shit, like EK of Ligger to get my like Blade Blast, DD of Chain. This was volatile dead, but performance is a little better in DD of Chain, even though the damage is a little bit less. Ball lightning orbiting, great effectiveness skill as well. So it's like essentially building a looper, like even here I have like my like Desecrate, Bladefall, Spell Cascade. Now, like typical looper stuff, like the spells don't really matter. Just I've been shifting them around a lot because it doesn't. You can kind of use whatever you want, honestly, between some combination of clear and damage. But issues with this build, I cannot afford to get a much bigger ES pool than it, and I don't mean like this character can't. I mean like I literally don't have the currency because my hands are fucked. I can't really play very much, so I don't have very much money, so I can't get a bigger ES pool. And the problem with that is, even like right now I'm stretching to get this much. Like I had to cut a ton of damage to get this. Like my damage, I don't know if we can play it like a boss showcase here. Is like not incredible, not great, yeah, like I would need a much bigger Twilight Regalia. I would need better boots with more ES. I need to recraft my belts to get int on it, since I no longer need resistances. And then helmet, probably need to get like north of 500 ES because that scales with mastery. But the point is, if I get my ES pool much bigger, like to 15 to 16K, I could then have a much bigger instance of ES Leech. Like right now, I already have a pretty big commitment ES Leech, I think like 8,000 ES Leech a second or something around like that. It's way more than that because all the multi-hit skills with instant Leech. But as my ES pool grows, my Leech grows. And as my Leech grows, I have to deal with situations like getting really low ES and then almost dying to self-damage more. As it's like, I do take a ton of damage like when I'm attacking. What's funny is the way I have to play it now, which makes it a little uncomfortable, is if my ES gets really low, I just stop attacking and let mobs hit me, and then which procs all my stuff, which then I leech back to full like pretty much immediately. But I like play it as a pseudo cast when damage take like cast when stun setup if my ES gets really low. But like monitoring, that's kind of annoying. And there are still a decent amount of map mods I can't run. Like I can't run cooldown recovery speed. I can't run no leech, like stuff like that, because that's entirely how our character sustains. But yeah, and then getting all the int and then ES and gear is like a little outside of my budget. I was using the trader for a bismuth flask and like stuff like that. I think I'm under res capped right now after switching over this. I need to shift my gear around to fix my resistances. But yeah, point being, it's I do think the concept of a cast on crit looper is very interesting. I mean, at least to me. But I don't know that I have the budget to afford to play it, and I might revisit it later, but I still don't even know if it's like a fully viable archetype because it doesn't exist. But I would really like to find out because it is. I think it's a really cool idea, and I hope somebody explores maybe not even this like kind of setup like on like Jiquani's or whatever, but just the cast on crit looper because I think there's something really cool there that is very underexplored. Oh, and one thing that is like really starting to drag, I should say, on this build, like one of the last straws for me on playing it is I think I could show some mapping here where it's just like my game is a complete fucking slideshow in this build. Like way worse than like I play a lot of builds that turn into slideshows because I'm a bit of a trigger main, but like Jesus Christ, it's just like it's like I get that with Looper as well, but like it's just like been particularly bad. I think a lot of it's maybe because I've been using like I probably shouldn't be running delirium mirrors, which is really bad by the way for like trigger builds and builds that rely on their flash for like resistances, like Deli, because it's like that shit just like lowers the effect and like reduces your charges and stuff. So I probably shouldn't be doing that anyway, but that's just what I've been doing because it's something mindless I can do like and just run to the end of strands. But yeah, it's just like my game just like basically locks up anytime I get into like a really really dense content in the middle of these like delirium mirrors, and it's just kind of not fun because it's like I don't know if I'm gonna die, and then I sometimes just do, and it's like, well, I had no idea that was happening because like you'll step on like a Searing Exarch rune or something, or just like a Dissolution, or just like other bullshit T16.5 mods that just like you can't really see because your game's like completely frozen. So yeah, it's not as bad as doing this on Poison, but I'm literally not using this for clear. I was hoping this would help, and it did not. So what can you do? I don't scale generic damage really well in this build, so that's not surprising. But yeah, it did not really solve that issue. Kind of stinks that the two things I've tried with this didn't pan out. I do still believe this item is incredibly strong. I just think that I don't have really enough funds to make it because it's a stacker, and I'm literally playing less than I'm poorest I've ever been. So probably the worst possible time for me to try stacking builds. But I just thought it looked really fun to want to try it. So yeah, next time we'll get there, I guess. But I'm sure either someone smarter than me or someone probably more money than me could make it function pretty well. And you can find their builds on like PoBs and stuff. I think next, I'm probably going to be working on a ward stack chicken axe build. I think it actually kind of looks absurd. I don't know what the skill is going to feel like, so let's hope it doesn't feel like shit. But I never actually played with it because it's never been strong as long as I've played PoE. So, but I think that changes. So we'll see. We'll see. Poops and butts out.